Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, 5 years after the adoption of the Disability Act, why are people with disabilities still unhappy, and what more are they expecting from government and other stakeholders? The government of Uganda, through Parliament, enacted the People with Disability Act, which outlines a number of steps to be taken to help persons with disabilities attain equality and development. But despite such a strong policy statement, a section of the disabled are unhappy that most of the issues therein are not being acted upon by the central government, local governments, the private sector, and even the communities where they reside. This community believes that other challenges have emerged that are not catered for in the Disability Act, while at the same time they continue to be ignored in most of the government's projects. Several petitions have been tabled in Parliament recently with regard to the rights of people with disability. But there seems to be no hope, and now pressure is being exerted on the representatives of the people with disability to make a point in the 9th Parliament. Out of anger, many NGOs working for the safeguarding and promotion of rights of the people with disabilities have decided to drag to court all those infringing on their rights, plus those not fulfilling the requirements of the Disability Act. On the 3rd of December, the world will commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disability. The theme for 2011 is Together for a Better World for All, including persons with disability in development, and the sub-theme will be including children and youth with disabilities in development. So tonight we ask, if disability is not an inability, what are those key issues that are blocking the disabled from advancing in terms of development and human rights? Also, what interventions are all stakeholders required to make to address these challenges, noting that the number of the peoples with disabilities has increased because of instability in the north and rampant accidents. Our guests tonight: Honorable Helen Grace Asamo, Member of Parliament representing people with disabilities in Eastern Uganda. You're most welcome, Honorable Asamo.
Thank you, Edmond. Good evening, listeners.
We are also joined by Mr. Joseph Walugembe, Country Program Director at Action on Disability and Development, Uganda. You're most welcome, Mr. Walugembe.
Thanks. Good evening, listeners.
We are also joined by Mr. Aggrey Olweny, Executive Director, Action for Youth with Disabilities, Uganda. You're most welcome, Mr. Olweny.
Thank you, and good evening, listeners.
Honorable Asamo, let's look at the current statistics. The number of people with disabilities is said to have grown because of the 20-year insurgency in the north and the numerous accidents that are reported each day. Now, this covers only people with physical disabilities. But from your records, what do you have? What figures do you have? The size of population of the people with disabilities and attendant factors.
Yeah, thank you, Edmond. I think the topic, as you opened it, first of all, is a bit of a challenging area. But I want to recognize that as I go to the point of talking of numbers, we might not say here that we have the exact data. People with disabilities, it's still a big challenge that we don't have data. But the recent statistics under the housing census of WUBOS, where they usually do this health service, they are telling us that the number has risen to 16%, people with disabilities, and this is what they always carry out. Of course, we have high hopes that in the next year's census that the number might come out bigger than this, looking at the war that we have had, like in the north, the accidents that occur every day on our roads, and many other issues that make us get disabilities. But the numbers are not yet specific. It's very easy to identify a disability which is physical and seen, but it's not very easy to get a disability which is hidden. And we have some silent disabilities that people might not know. For example, if somebody is taking drugs and is a person with a mental health problem, by looking at him or her, you don't know that she's what? A person with disability. Some people have low vision, like my brother Joseph here. When you look at him, you think he has sight, but he has his own challenges.
Ladies have very handsome eyes.
Exactly. So they see him as a very handsome man, and they think he's very okay. But you see him missing steps, and you're like, oh, what's happening to this country director? So there are these disabilities that are not seen, that sometimes even the people who go out to look up the numbers, like WUBOS, are really fighting challenges. But still, as members of parliament and the Minister of Gender, we have engaged them and the disability movement to see that the questions they ask should be very positive in a way that people accept to be people with disabilities, including you, Edmond, with your glasses.
Yes.
I imagine that when you remove them, you might not be able to read the papers. So we want all that data captured so that we plan to have those glasses available.
Well, you're giving me a tip. If I want to go to parliament, there's an easy way I can do it now. I can, because I wear glasses, I could say I have a disability and stand in parliament.
Talk about it. No, talk about it. And Edmond, right now we have challenges because politically, I think Uganda we have achieved because we have representation from the village to the national. But we had cases in the last election where the electoral commission had challenges to define who is now the disabled.
Right.
My brothers here will agree. Somebody comes with a small finger, my nail is out, you know, I have a
says
problem.
it's disabled.
This one says, you know, when I remove the glasses, because now it's about position.
Right.
Somebody comes and says, you know, my uterus was removed. How now do I assess the uterus? Because the person has said, yeah, I don't have it.
Right.
You now need a medical attention. So disability, because of the benefits, many people have come out to say they are disabled. And now as the people who were born with it, with the original ones,
yes,
we have challenges of even seeing how we can bring in everybody.
And broadly, how do you draw the line? We know of an old man who once said he was an orphan and he was 80 years old. Obviously, he was an orphan because his parents had died. Where do you draw the line in this case?
The challenge we have still, because of the Person with Disability Act, when you look at the codings, it almost brings everybody. Because it talks of asthma, talks of high blood pressure, it talks of accidents, it talks of almost everything. So our codings are having a challenge. And as we shall continue with the debate, we are now trying to revise the Person with Disability Act and see that we define who is a disabled person. Because otherwise we're bringing everybody on board. And because of the advantage of positions now, everybody says, now I will come on board. And they can take you to court because the codings really refer them as persons with what? Disabilities.
All right. At one time, bald-headed men were also raising it. They are disabled because they don't have hair at certain points. Mr. Joseph Walugembe, as you talk to us, as you try to draw the line of the people with disabilities, can you give us an overview of where we've come from since the NRM, for instance, came to power? Benefits for people with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Edmond. And once again, good evening, listeners. Let me attempt to compliment my colleague who was trying to draw the line of who might be considered disabled, given that many people may wish now to be considered disabled because of their apparent benefits. But disability is constituted by several factors. First is the physical condition or the impairment. Say you think your eyes don't see as well as they should see. Secondly, you feel your legs are not as strong as they should be, or your mind is not as sound as it should be. But that is only one factor. The second factor is in relation to the performance of activities or actions. The extent of that impairment must be such that it limits your ability to perform a task compared to other people. If your eyes do not precisely see very well, because there is a certain detail you cannot see, like a pin dropped on the floor, but then that does not stop you from driving, which is an ordinary activity. That does not stop you from reading ordinary print. That does not stop you from crossing busy roads. That may not constitute, say, a visual disability. Thirdly, there is the whole aspect of attitudes. To what extent do people regard your condition and exclude you from normal activities? If the impairment is such that people regard your condition as abnormal and may use it as a basis to exclude you from participation, from enjoying other facilities, other conditions, then that may be an impairment. So look at your glasses. What's people's attitude towards glasses? How much can you achieve with or without your glasses? Then you may choose whether you have a disability or not, and whether you wish to be counted or not. Now I'll come to your question. How far have we come since the NRM government, that is 1986? Maybe we need to look at the whole spectrum of disability. For us, we say disability is evolving. And certainly, people with disability and the condition of disability has evolved like the Ugandan society has. By the time the NRM government came, the disability movement was operating in what we call the charitable model. This was a time when people with disability were looked at as having a problem in themselves. You had a physical disability, so you couldn't walk. You had a visual problem, so you couldn't see. You were a problem. So society felt at that time that you needed to be helped. That's what we considered the charitable model. You are disabled, so you can't work, so you need to be given food, you need to be given clothing, you need to be helped. And if there was anything that you could do, it had to be determined by the society. For example, physically disabled people could concentrate, so they would sit down and mend shoes, mend clothes. People with disabilities had very good listening abilities, so they thought, so they could be good telephone operators. The blind, people who are deaf don't mind noise, so they could work in noisy workshops, carpentry, metalwork. But the whole society evolved, and it came to what we call the social model. This recognizes that actually the problem is not with the disabled person. The problem is within society and within the environment. A person with a visual impairment is only disabled in relationship to a computer if it does not have accessibility, if it does not have screen readers. When you have a piece of computer with a screen reader, then you can no longer say Joseph Walugembe, who does not see, is disabled in relationship to this computer. A person with a physical disability is only disabled in relationship to a building if it has staircases and it does not have, for example, a lift or a ramp. Now, that still remains the condition today, where probably Uganda is still at, as we speak in 2011. A person with the problem, as we always say, is not in my leg. It's with you, in your mind. If you look at my leg and you think Helen is not beautiful enough because she uses crutches, that's your problem. That's not what she thinks. And a husband who's liberated, that's not what he thinks. But the other level is what we call the human rights level. That disabled people are part of the human diversity. That probably the human race would be incomplete if all of you were the same. How else would you appreciate the importance of your eyes?
Right.
If you didn't look at Joseph, who doesn't see. Right. And we are saying that it's now the time for full participation, right, equitable benefit
in society.
In society.
Mr. Aggrey, you are Executive Director, Mr. Olweny, you are Executive Director of Action for Youth with Disabilities in Uganda. Can you give us the dynamics of the youth with disabilities? What makes them special as a group, youth?
Well, thank you, Edmond. I'll give like a brief background about the disability movement, just in line with what Joseph has just said.
Yes.
Initially, there were disabled people's organizations, but mainly they were focusing on elderly persons with disabilities. So they were not looking at youth and children with disabilities. So over the years, there are programs that have been focusing on persons with disabilities, but not specifically really addressing the needs of young people with disabilities, youth with disabilities. And in that line, their young people with disabilities have, like, their challenges are unique. They have to access education, quality education. When you're young, that's when you need to get education, yes, so that you're able to live. It helps you in future to live productively and live independently in society.
Right.
But when you're educated, you also have to get employment. And this is what has been lacking. Many young people with disabilities have, over the years, they've enrolled into, education, institutions of learning, and they have been accessing education. But the ultimate goal, as in achieving employment, has not been there.
Right.
And the other problem has been the reproductive health.
Yes.
They cannot access the programs that are targeting issues of reproductive health has not really trickled down to young people with disabilities yet. This is when you're young, that's the time when you're active sexually. You really, you need to really use protective measures like any other, person with disabilities. But also the areas of maybe recreation and sports and recreation, youth with disabilities have not been part of it, and actually generally that's what is lacking.
Right.
So looking at that, you find the vulnerability part of it. This rendered the issues of youth with disabilities vulnerable,
all right,
because the programs are not directly targeting them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about, let's get away from the youth a little bit. Let's talk about polio. There was a time when it was a big contributor to people with physical disabilities. How serious is it now? Has it been eradicated, or is it still prevalent in some communities?
Well, the government has come up with the intervention, especially in trying to address this problem of polio, like immunization. I think the campaign has been going on, but I think as we speak now, I really don't know I can't tell
Thanks. This one probably I should blow a little more of myself and say I am a Rotarian from the Rotary Club of Kampala, Naguru, and the government of Uganda, in partnership with Rotary, joining the international campaign to eradicate polio. And I think until recently, Uganda had been declared polio-free thanks to the campaign by Rotary and the government of Uganda. But I think what that demonstrates is that if there is concerted commitment by the government and the goodwill of society, and in this case Rotary, you can really get to the bottom of an issue, just like the partnership between government and Rotary demonstrated in the eradication of polio.
Honorable Sam, that's very good. Rotary has helped a great deal in eradicating immunization and helping people avoid. What causes polio, very briefly?
Polio is caused by a virus.
Yes.
It strikes especially between the ages of 1 and 5, and ideally, like all viral diseases, it cannot be treated. All that it takes is to prevent it through an immunization.
How about hygiene? Because I believe it comes through fecal matter as well.
It breeds through hygiene, but it's contagious.
Honorable Samuel, talk to us about the North. We've managed to come some distance in removing polio, which is probably a difficult situation. Talk to us about the situation in the North, the conflict in the North, 20 years. How much did it contribute?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I give some kind of background on the disability movement, because when we started it in 1986, but we need to recognize that there were some disability institutions like the blind we already organized in the 70s, and even the deaf we organized in the 70s. But to get this one voice under Nudipo, it came out in 1987 after 86. And when it came on board, of course, we started mobilizing ourselves. I agree with Aggrey that maybe the youth were not recognized, but I think the youth were recognized at that time, but it was not a specific group. I joined the disability movement when I was young. I think for him he was a child, but we were struggling. But what has brought now the mass of the youth is the affirmative action, first of all, on education, that has brought the students to the university, and there are really too many. They were not like the time we were. Our time, you'd find that you could be 1 or 2 in the school.
The others stay in the village.
Yeah. But nowadays, because of the affirmative action, children have gone to school because the policy allows it. Now going to the north, we already had people who were disabled in the north of Uganda, but the challenge now has increased because of the war. Most of these people, mental health challenges have increased in the north. Some of these people don't have psychological support.
Mental health. Because of the trauma of the war.
Because the trauma. Because all your relatives have died, you have to go there. So the numbers have increased. We have people with physical disability. Some of them, we call them landmine survivors. their legs have been cut off, and somebody to cope up when you have not been in the disability movement and you just get it. Again, it's physical but also has a mental problem. So you find people have been there. Some of them have gone to deafness because of the wars, the guns, and all these other things. They have lost their hearing impaired.
The sense of hearing.
Right. And they do not know sign language. So they are in a dilemma of even how to communicate about their challenges to the implementers. But of course, we thank that some partners, and many of them, have moved to the north to try to mobilize these people. And especially the umbrella organization, DIPO, has really placed itself in the north to see that we mobilize these people and see how we can refer those who need medical attention and try to direct them in the line that Joseph has said. The newcomers are still looking at themselves that they could have charity. I hope God will give us something.
Yes.
But we're telling them, no, the remaining part of you can do something to help you live independently.
Right.
Yeah.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, 5 years after the adoption of the Disability Act, why are people with disabilities still unhappy? What more are they expecting from government and other stakeholders? We're going for a break. Do stay tuned because we'll be right back.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special.
You've earned it. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Let the sunlight in.
Good morning, sunshine of my life. You look happy today.
I am. I came in here and I saw there was a whole pile of washing to do.
But I thought you didn't like doing the washing.
No, I love it. Anything else you need washed?
Sunlight 2-in-1 with added fabric softener. Smells so good, you want to use it again and again.
Let the sunlight in.
Sunlight 2-in-1. Sunlight clean, sunlight fresh.
Sunlight in. Happiness is all around. Let the sunlight in.
Is your internet provider turning your world upside down? Broadband Company offers fast and reliable internet solutions. And for the first 100 subscribers this month, we offer zero connection fees. Save up to 400,000. For more information on these offers, call toll-free 0800 222 111.
Broadband Company, more than you expect.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight, 5 years after the adoption of the Disability Act. Why are people with disabilities still unhappy? What more are they expecting from government and other stakeholders? Our guests tonight, Honorable Helen Grace Asamo, MP representing people with disabilities in Eastern Uganda, Mr. Joseph Walugembe, Country Program Director at Action on Disability and Development Uganda, and Mr. Aggrey Olweny, Executive Director, Action for Youth with Disabilities in Uganda. You'll be able to contribute to this discussion. I'll read out the numbers when that time comes. You can also send a message via text, via your mobile phone. Type the word Spectrum, space, question, message or comment and send it to 7197. Mr. Olweny, talk to us about the government legislation, the legislation. Is it adequate to the laws that we have? Are they adequate to cater for people with disabilities?
Yes, thank you. There are a number of laws and policies that the government of Uganda has come up with to maybe protect the rights of persons with disabilities, and a number of them have the National Person with Disabilities Act. They also have the